Hey everyone, it's Zach Beck. Since taking office, President Biden has promised to act swiftly in order to address the ongoing pandemic, and specifically, he has proposed the American Rescue Plan. This $1.9 trillion piece of legislation includes a third stimulus check worth up to $1,400, and the funding for this proposal has already been passed by both the Senate as well as the House of Representatives, and because they're now going through the framework through budget reconciliation, they only need a simple majority to pass this and actually have it become law in the Senate, with Vice President Harris being the tie-breaking vote. So what I want to do in this video is break down in detail what the American Rescue Plan is, how it would impact you directly, and what you should be doing right now in order to prepare for this becoming law. So let's take our time, dive into the details, and jump into it right now. As previously mentioned, the American Rescue Plan includes a third stimulus check worth up to $1,400. Now, President Biden said he will not budge on the total amount because Congress previously passed a second stimulus check that was worth $600, and he wants to get a total of $2,000 to Americans who are struggling through this pandemic. Now, he met with a group of 10 Republican senators hoping to bridge the gap in order to avoid having to go through the filibuster process, but one of the downsides of that negotiation was that group was actually requesting that be lowered to a lower rate. So instead, he's actually moving forward in what is called budget reconciliation, where it only requires a simple majority to pass through the Senate. And like I said previously, Vice President Harris would then be the tie-breaking vote, and then it would become law. And when we look at the $1,400 third stimulus check, there are a few changes that might actually transpire that are different than previously. The first is this: it could include eligible adult dependents. Previously, that was up to an individual who was 16 years old, and it could be a $500 payment that went to individuals who had someone in their household. This could actually bump that up to $1,400 and actually change the age associated with that. So individuals who are staying at home because either they've been let go, they lost their job, they're furloughed, or maybe they might have some other reason why they're staying with their parents at an older age, this would allow those individuals who are actually depending upon them to receive additional funding so that way they can get through this pandemic a little bit easier. Furthermore, this would also change the approach they're currently using to allow individuals to receive payments who have a mixed family citizenship status. So if someone in the family is an American citizen, the other is not, it might actually change the approach going in that regard. Now, I'm not here to say this is a good or a bad thing, I'm just telling you this is what is being reported currently. So it's important to be aware of what is transpiring, but what is most important as it relates to this third stimulus check is they are now going to consider the actual cap at which someone would be eligible to receive the payment. So as of right now, it's up for an individual who makes $75,000 a year, or for a couple that makes up to $150,000 a year, they would be eligible to receive the payment. And what is happening right now is they're possibly considering maybe lowering that threshold to be a more targeted in order to see who's going to receive their payments. Now, President Biden said that he doesn't want individuals who are making $300,000 receiving these type of payments, so I would anticipate them being as targeted as possible, but it's difficult to discern what that exact threshold is going to be. But if they don't change it at all, we should anticipate that individuals who previously received stimulus checks for the $1,200 and $600 previously should receive a $1,400 stimulus check moving forward. There have been various iterations of stimulus that have transpired over the last year, so it's difficult to keep track of everything that is going on. But one thing to bear in mind is if you're now receiving unemployment assistance, one of the benefits of this new proposal in the American Rescue Plan is they're going to increase that to $400 for weekly benefits, and they're actually going to extend it through September of 2021. Right now, those benefits are set to expire in March, and it's still going to leave a lot of people on the line who might not be able to continue to work because of the pandemic, because of health-related issues, or perhaps their industry hasn't gotten back up to steam, so they're not able to come back to their previous job. So what we're going to see is this extension of unemployment benefits worth up to $400 a week moving forward until September of 2021. The overarching issue that is driving the need for the Senate, the House, and the President to expedite the process by which the American Rescue Plan gets passed is the pandemic. Now, fortunately, vaccines were developed that actually can help with this issue, but the speed at which they're being distributed is very slow at this current time. So what they're proposing in this piece of legislation is an $160 billion that could go towards a nationwide vaccine distribution approach and hopefully could expedite the process by which they're getting vaccines distributed to Americans who desperately need them right now. Now, President Biden has said that he wants to get 100 shots done during his first 100 days in office. That's a lofty goal and hopefully it can get done, but what we're going to see is it's going to require additional funding, and that's why this bill is proposing such. So when you look at this from the grand scheme of things, $160 billion is a lot of money, but when you think about the public health implications and then the economic implications of us not being able to get the economy back up and running fully because people aren't vaccinated, you can understand why this is an important piece to have in this legislation. Now, from that standpoint alone, it's important for us to bear in mind that when we're going forward on this trajectory as it currently stands, if we do not do something to expedite this process, we're going to be that much slower in our overall recovery. That would keep unemployment rates very high. That would keep our economic GDP very low. And so this is actually a very important point that I believe is essential for them to actually have in this piece of legislation, almost irrespective of the other elements that are in it right now. An additional element of this plan would be expanding the child tax credit. Right now it's capped at $2,000, but what they're proposing is actually having this go up to almost $3,600 depending upon the age of the individual, and could be as low as $3,000. So if you had multiple children, you could actually see a substantial child tax credit associated with that. So this proposal looks like it will be included in this piece of legislation, and if you have children, this will impact you directly. It's important to be aware of that the age of your child does impact the amount that you're allowed to have as your tax credit. So if they're under the age of 13 and they have childcare that's required, then you could actually get up to $4,000 for an individual, or up to $8,000 for if you had multiple children, whereas that number goes down to $3,000 or $3,600 as they grow older. One of the areas of our country that has been impacted most significantly by this pandemic is the educational sector, specifically as you're looking at students who attend from kindergarten all the way through high school. And it has been a significant impact on them because they've had to transition to working remotely. This has not only been damaging for children from a psychological standpoint and from a social standpoint, but then you take into consideration all the different life achievements they're missing out on as well. Being able to participate in sports, being able to have their normal social interactions, and then you factor in the teachers as well, who now have to control classes of up to 40 students on Zoom or some other video conferencing application. So clearly opening up schools is essential to not only helping the impacts it's having directly on those individuals as students, but also on our broader economy as a whole, because then as parents who might have children, it's more difficult for them to go out into the workforce if they have to watch their children. So as you can see, this does have a direct impact on our economy, so opening up schools is essential. Now, as we're looking towards that as a part of this legislation, it is anticipated that there will be additional funding set aside in the tens of billions of dollars to help with the reopening of schools in a safe manner, so they can have proper testing, proper spacing, proper ventilation systems in the schools, etc., things that could actually help, providing the proper equipment necessary to teachers to protect themselves, and doing everything necessary to get things back up and running. And hopefully all of this is just a temporary approach that can be used as we get through the end of this pandemic and move forward. But as you can see, funding for schools, of reopening schools, is going to be definitely an element associated with this plan. An area that's generally unforgotten is what happens with local, state, and tribal governments, and what you're going to see is additional funding set aside for that right now, because a lot of those different areas of our society, as far as local governments are concerned, are impacted by sales tax, by property tax, by how the economy is doing generally. And since we pushed the pause button on the economy when we shut all these businesses down, we imposed stay-at-home orders and did everything necessary that was happening during the midst of the pandemic, not saying it was good or bad, just it's what happened, what that did is it definitely had an impact on the budgetary constraints of different tribal, local, and state governments. So there's additional funding in this bill that's actually going to help in that respect. And I can speak specifically as someone who does work in local government that the pandemic had a direct impact in that regard. But I also will say that it's important for those who are in local, in state, and tribal government to be fiscally responsible, not just take this funding and then do additional projects that aren't necessary. It really should just be used to plug the budgetary holes right now so that way they can become whole and move forward long term to have a more sustainable future. So from that standpoint alone, you should anticipate a little bit of money going in that direction. As it currently stands, there's a nationwide eviction moratorium that is in effect until March of this year. However, millions of people are stressed out about the possibility of being let go and having to be evicted out of their rent, out of their home, out of their apartment because they cannot afford their rent. So that's another thing that's going to happen, is they're looking to extend that moratorium through September of 2021. And one thing to bear in mind is you're seeing all these kind of proposals being pushed back to September. It should be a good indication of where it looks like the government sees things returning to some semblance of normalcy. So September September might be a good time frame for us to operate with when we're looking at when things might have settled down, specifically in the sense where vaccines have been distributed. That would be when school would be starting back up again, and maybe the economy is revving up again after a nice summer of people being able to start traveling and doing things of that nature. So that's just my ability to kind of portend in that direction. Not saying it's necessarily what's going to happen, but it is interesting that the kind of proposals all are looking at September of 2021 as their time frame right now. You might be asking yourself, what about the minimum wage increase? Now, on the campaign trail, President Biden proposed that he would actually increase the federal minimum wage up to $15 an hour. Now, as you might be aware of, this minimum wage is different by state, but he was looking to establish a higher threshold from the federal government's perspective, and people were anticipating that he would actually include this as part of this piece of legislation. But as of right now, it looks like that is not going to happen. So if you're an individual who's waiting for the hopeful minimum wage to be increased to $15 an hour, it looks like it's not going to occur in this piece of legislation. It possibly could on some standalone item, but that is something that doesn't look likely at this point in time. And on that note specifically, if you're right now in a minimum wage job and you're trying to find a way to move forward, I would recommend looking at a couple of other videos I put together as far as how to find new jobs, how to expand your career horizons, how to establish new credentials and do things that could actually help you move out of this society. Now, I'm not saying specifically that if you're in a minimum wage job, that is a bad thing. If that's what you have right now, that's totally cool. But if you want more than that, I would also encourage you to take all the steps necessary and work diligently in order to kind of take that next step in your career trajectory, because it will help you to be able to then save more money, to be able to invest and be able to be more stable financially, which then has direct implications on your physical, social, emotional, and spiritual and mental well-being as a whole. So from that standpoint alone, feel free to check out my channel. I have a lot of videos specifically to how you can advance in the career field and get a better job. So take a look at that at your convenience. A big question on many people's minds is what's going to happen with student loan forgiveness. Now, it was anticipated there was going to be maybe a $10,000 level of student loan forgiveness as part of this proposal, but it looks like right now that is not included in this piece of legislation, which for some individuals is very unfortunate. For others, you might think that's okay, but I just want to let you know right now that does not appear likely in this piece of legislation as it's going to be currently written. So from that standpoint alone, what you want to factor in is that it looks like President Biden did make a campaign trail promise to be able to have some form of student loan forgiveness. So I would anticipate that happening at some point in time, but it's probably going to be debated in its own separate piece of legislation that's going to require more buy-in from more senators. Because as I previously mentioned, this piece of legislation is going to go through what's called budget reconciliation, where it only requires a simple majority of the Senate in order for it to pass. But you will find that student loan forgiveness is not just popular amongst Democrats or Republicans. It's kind of a party-wide approach. Everyone seems to be in favor of it in some shape or form because we understand the economic implications associated with it. So I would anticipate something coming back at a later time where then more Republicans get buy-in, and you might actually get more than 60 votes, which would clear the filibuster threshold and allow people to actually have this kind of form of student loan forgiveness established. Also, it's very difficult to argue that student loan forgiveness is part of an emergency relief bill, and I think that's probably why the president has thought of it this way and not included it specifically into this right now. So I'm not saying this is a good thing or a bad thing. I'm just giving you kind of my assessment at this current moment. And if you want to check out additional elements associated with my thoughts on student loan forgiveness, I have various videos I've put together about this, so feel free to check those out at your convenience. But most importantly, it's something to be aware of that if you currently have student loans that are outstanding, the pause button has still been pushed on how you're going to actually pay them. But you really want to take your time to make sure you're putting your financial house in order, irrespective of what the government is going to do. Because if anything has been taught over the course of this pandemic is the government is slow and generally inefficient in getting things done when it comes to actually acting on pieces of legislation that are going to impact you directly. So if you right now are dealing with student loans, you want to factor that into your overall broader financial approach. You shouldn't just be waiting for the government to do something. Try and get your financial house in order right now by cutting back on spending, saving money where you can, eliminating other forms of debt that you currently have, and then try and invest into the stock market, into safe areas such as index funds, so you can begin building your wealth so you're not dealing with a negative net worth right now with your student loans. Hopefully you can move forward on a positive net worth that could lead to more financial security long term, and hopefully for someday when you want to be able to retire. So those are just a few of my thoughts, but I think it's important for you moving forward that you just don't rely solely on what the government is going to do, because it is uncertain at this time. There's one area that is missing in this piece of legislation that was popular back when the CARES Act was passed in 2020, and that was when they allowed individuals to actually withdraw from their 401k, IRA, or other retirement accounts penalty-free. Now, it was anticipated that they were going to extend that beyond the previous deadline, which ended at the end of 2020, and allow people to continue to do so right now. However, it looks like that is not going to be the case, unfortunately, so people who are in desperate need for additional finances, that's not going to be a source where you can actually access them penalty-free right now. That could change possibly, but it looks like that door is closed at this present moment. So it's just something to be aware of, that as you're moving forward, if you were anticipating being able to do so, that is not going to be an option for you. And once again, that was kind of a last resort alternative that people could utilize if they were short on finances. But hopefully right now, if you're finding yourself in a difficult situation, hopefully you'll be able to get the additional stimulus check. Hopefully you'll be able to find additional ways to bring in new revenue so you can remain financially whole. And I'm very sorry if you're dealing with a tough financial situation right now, as millions of people are at this present moment. But if you're able to make tangible steps right now that can help put you on stronger footing, hopefully that'll get you moving forward in a better direction. So I just want to encourage you in that regard, that even though this option might not exist now, you hopefully can take other steps to move forward. Once again, being as self-reliant as possible in this time when the government is not necessarily doing everything it can to help you, which is understandable because government can't do everything for us, and that's not what we should be relying on it for. But it's important for us to take our steps necessary to make sure that we're financially secure. With this bill potentially becoming law, I think it's important to take one quick step back and take a look at what we're looking at in our government as a whole right now. And what we found was that the overall theme of President Biden's inauguration ceremony and his speech was that he wanted to have unity. He wanted people to be united amongst Republicans and Democrats, which I believe is a noble goal and it's something we should be striving for. But one thing to bear in mind is that we have so many different varying beliefs in our country right now because we're such a diverse area. And that is a good thing, is that we have competing ideas with different approaches in different geographical areas, different economic areas, different societal areas that really drive the overall political dynamic in our country as a whole. So finding unity is going to be a very challenging thing right at this moment. So you might find people who are being critical of the president right now for trying to put through this piece of legislation only with Democratic support, even though he's been preaching that he wanted more unity. But he wasn't able to get the Republican senators on board, even though he met with those 10 senators from the Republican Party, and they weren't able to bridge a discussion or bring a solution that could actually move forward. So it's just something to be aware of, that at least there's these olive branches that are going out, and hopefully over time we can see more unification in our approach to how we have our civil discourse. And I think that is really more so what we should have. We're probably never going to have unity on ideas. There's always going to be two sides to the coin, if not multiple sides that we're looking at, almost like a multifaceted diamond when we're looking at some of these bigger, more controversial issues. But hopefully we can strive to have a bit more unity in our dialogue, basically understanding that there are certain ground rules and facts that are out there in society that we should be willing to agree upon. What is a real thing versus what is not a real thing? What is a conspiracy versus what is actually happening? Things like that. And hopefully we can do so in a respectful manner. And you might have different belief system than myself. I might have a different belief system than you. Heck, we might have the same kind. It just varies from individual to individual. And I'm not saying that anyone's is going to be better than the other or anyone is specifically right. It's just fueled by our own approach to how we view things, and that's totally cool. So I really respect that people have different views. I like to hear them. So if you actually have different views or you want to share your views, please comment down below, because I always want to engage and understand where you're coming from and how I can help and how I can understand more so I become more well-informed, because I don't have all the answers myself. Furthermore, from a political perspective, hopefully the more that we have people engaging in dialogue, which is a positive thing, like when those 10 Republican senators were meeting with the Democratic president, that can at least open the door to possibilities for more compromise and better pieces of legislation that more reflect the overall national approach that we need in our country at a later time. So at least it kind of sets us in that direction. Now, I'm not here to be a huge supporter of the president or an advocate against the president or anything like that. I'm just kind of giving you my assessment. But overall, I think the more that we can strive to have a civil discourse and better dialogue that can actually help address some of the problems in our society, I think that's a positive thing. So that's just what I want to share with you. With all that being said, I'd like to thank you for watching the video today. If you wouldn't mind, please destroy the like button. It would really help the channel out for the YouTube algorithm, help push this video to other people who might need to hear it. In addition, if you have any questions, please comment down below. I'd love to interact with you, get to know you, answer any questions on your behalf, and do any research on your behalf. Furthermore, if you wouldn't mind, please subscribe to the channel. That would mean a lot to myself personally, as I do everything I can to create positive content that makes a meaningful impact in your life by encouraging you and myself to lead lives of meaning and purpose, all while maintaining balance and moderation. And if you do subscribe to the channel, please tap the notification bell. That will notify you every time I post a video, which I do on a weekly basis. Once again, I'd like to thank you for watching the video today. I hope you have a wonderful remainder of your day. Talk to you next time.